Let's start by taking the wheel off, 19mm socket, take off all 5 of your lug nuts. And remove the wheel. Next, I want to remove this shield here with a few 10mm bolts. There's one right over here. Okay, another one right over here. And last one at the front. Now grab this, slide it forward or towards the front of the car, unhook it. Let's go to the front and slide that forward as well. Take this off. Let's take off this 8mm bolt that holds the parking brake cable in place. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to put a pole jack here just to support this control arm, or the trailing arm I guess it would be, so I can unbolt the 2 15mm bolts that hold it on without it coming shooting down at me. I'm going to start with this one over here. Again, 15mm socket. There's one. And the second one. Now release pressure off of whatever you had supporting it. Now I'm going to support this rear arm because I want to take this bolt out, and then we can take a couple bolts out at the front for the arms and pivot it down so we can get that bushing. So let's take this 15mm bolt out. There it is. Now lower this down carefully. Okay, keep lowering this. It should stop. The sway bar will actually hold it up as long as you still have it connected. This is still wedged in here. It's not going anywhere. So you can leave this like this. The arm is out. Now let's go to the front so we can undo control arm bolts there. Now let's take this front lower arm bolt off, also a 15mm socket. There it is. I'm just going to pop the ABS wire off of this control arm. That way it gives me a little bit more slack. Then, since I'm here, take it out of this bracket, just like that. That way when I pull this arm down, I can actually have space here with the wire. Let's take off the bolt for the top arm, also 15mm. Okay. Perfect. Let's pop this off as well. Might as well do this one, just in case. There we go. Lots of slack. Now we can get to our bushing. I'm actually going to put the pole jack under here, support the knuckle like this. That way it doesn't literally just hang by the shock. It can actually be supported here weight-wise, and then the shock will make sure it doesn't fall off. So what I have here is the bushing that I'm going to press out, and I'm going to try to use a ball joint press, but because I'm using that, I can't have this sticking out on both sides because the cup that's going to fit over isn't obviously going to be this long. It's going to be about this long, and this is in the way. So because mine is still in there, sometimes you can get these to just pop out with a hammer because the bushing is so bad it has actually let go of this inner sleeve here, the mounting point, but mine is not. So you have options. You can cut it like I'm going to. You can try to hammer it out if you think it'll come out. Or you can do whatever else you think you need to do, but this is how I'm going to do it. So I have my ball joint press set up here. I know this is not the best situation here. I just don't really have a cup that'll fit here to push this through. I thought I did, but I don't. So I'm going to try this. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Worst case, it'll push this inner sleeve through, and in that case, I'll just take my air chisel and try to peen over the edges and drive it through with the air chisel. But for now, we'll try this. I'll just finish driving this through. Obviously, for anything that I'm using the air chisel for, you can use a hammer. It's just going to be a lot slower and might be a little more difficult. Okay, that's out, and this actually makes it so that I can squeeze this bushing in now with nothing restricting me from doing so. Now I'm just going to try to peen these edges in. So as you can see, I air chiseled around. It's working. This is exactly what I wanted to start doing, kind of peen the edges over, and I sprayed it with some rust penetrant. Hopefully that's going to work its way in there between the arm and the bushing and help me out a little bit. What I'm going to do next is grab a reciprocating saw blade and cut a slit right here. Hopefully that will relieve some pressure and help me drive it out faster. You don't have to do this, but it does typically help. And of course you can do this with a hand saw as well. Just make sure you have a nice sharp blade, but this will work a little faster. Okay, let's see what that did. Try to air chisel this up, kind of peel it away. Yep, it's working. Okay, here it comes. All right, so now we have to clean up the surface. I have some sharp edges here that I want to remove, and of course I want to degrease and wire brush the surface to get rid of any rust that has built up in there. I'm going to start by putting some brake parts cleaner on this whole area just to get off the oils that I applied. That way I can see what I'm working with here. And this is actually not too bad in here. Might take a wire brush to spots like that. And I want to take a sanding disc and actually sand down these sharp areas here. Much better. Of course, you could do this with sandpaper by hand. Have some nice coarse grit sandpaper and just make sure it's nice and smooth. Perfect. Let's grab a wire brush and wire brush the inside of it. Like I said, areas like this is where I want to clean it up a little bit. That way the new bushing can press in nice and smoothly. So I have this ball joint press set up here with the new bushing. It's not started, it's just kind of hanging here, and it took me a while to get this set up with the right cup sizes and holding everything together. Basically what I'm trying to do now is take this bushing, this new one will have a lip on it. I'm going to press it in all the way, and I know I'm pressing on the rubber piece, and I tried not to, and it's basically impossible because this press, the ball joint press is so short, I can't put another cup here. So I'm going to try to start it in like this, but of course I'm going to watch the rubber and make sure that it doesn't rip or overextend or anything like that. I'm going to try and be as gentle as I can to it. And so basically I'm pulling it through into this receiving cup, and the other thing I want to mention is to make sure that this piece here is kind of parallel with the arm. That's how it was when it came out, and you want to put this the same direction, otherwise when you go to put the arm up, this is going to be at an angle, and just like any bushing, if you tighten it down like that, then it's going to be in a bind when you're driving, and it's going to prematurely wear. So, having said all that, let's give this a shot. Okay, time to readjust. It's going a little bit crooked, and I still don't have room for a cup, so I'm going to take a hammer, place it here. I don't recommend doing this, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. All right, so we're almost there, maybe about 2 more millimeters. Let's give it one last push. That's perfect right there. Back off the tool. There it is. All right, I have a pole jack supporting the brake drum area. I'm going to use that to raise this up to about where I can line up some bolt holes here. Okay, this control arm is in, not lined up, but it's in. So now all I have to do is line it up. I want to start with this one, and then we'll go from here. And these 2 arms, this bottom one and this top one, had a shorter bolt, and this big arm in the back with the coil spring had a longer bolt. So make sure you put those back where they belong. Okay, wiggle this around. I have my bolt hole almost lined up. Okay, that's lined up right there. Stick the bolt through, start it on the threads. Perfect. Let's move on to that top bolt now. Okay, push the knuckle in, make sure this bracket is on. Let's get the bolt through with it lined up. Get the bolt through. Okay, make sure it comes out the other side onto the threads, which it does. Let's start it in. All right, that one's started. Leave it loose. I'm not going to torque these until the end when everything is under pressure with the weight of the vehicle on it. Now let's put on the lower arm. Let's get the arm jacked up and up into the knuckle. That's working. Perfect. This part of the bushing was getting hung up on that. Bring this up till the bolt hole lines up. Right about there. Close. Looks like it needs to pull out a little bit. Okay, pry in whichever direction you need. Lower or raise your support to make this line up. Stick the bolt through. Now we can start this one onto the threads as well. Again, these are all 15mm bolts. Okay, this one's finally starting. That's perfect. We'll bring it in a couple threads. That way I know it's secure. And then we'll put on the bolts for the front bushing that we just replaced. Then I'm going to jack up the suspension and torque everything down. So this one's in, it's secure, so are all the other ones. Let's move to the front. All right, now let's get this bushing up into place there. There's a wire here, and of course I don't want to damage it, so I'm going to pry this arm away, get it over the wire. And now let's start in the bolts. I cleaned up the threads and put some blue thread locker on, just like it had when it came out. Stick it in through the hole, and if your bushing doesn't line up 100% perfectly, probably because there's no load on the suspension, then you can use a long extension, kind of twist it into place. Of course, make sure you don't pinch the wire. There's one. Number two. Oh yeah. Tighten this down. Now that they're both in and bottomed out, let's make sure they're nice and tight. Yep. That's as tight as it's going to get. Let's reinstall the parking brake cable mounting bracket here. Put that 8mm bolt back in. Nice and tight. And wherever you disconnected or unhooked your ABS wire from, make sure you put it back in its retainers. That way it's nice and secure. I pretty much went and disconnected it all along. So I'm going to go back all the way to there. That's all secure. Perfect. Now let's put some load on the suspension and bring the whole knuckle up. That way we can tighten up the bushings here. That's good right there. Let's tighten all these up. All right, let's make sure these are nice and tight. There's that top one, and now the bottom one. Perfect. 85 foot-pounds for all of these control arm bolts. Last one. All right, those are all tightened up. Let's remove our support. Let the suspension down again. I'm going to remove this piece here and slide it into the shield where it belongs. And I'll do the same to the front one. Make sure it's pressed in all the way. Make sure it's pressed in all the way. Let's do the same to this front one over here. There we go. Now line up the shield with its mounting locations and press those tabs in. That'll support it until you get the bolts. All right, let's get the bolts. There were 3 of them. One at the back, one on the side right here. And one in the front. Perfect. Let's get the wheel back on. Start on all of your lug nuts, bottom them out, and torque them to 100 foot-pounds.